Imagine being crushed under 700 pounds of stone, your ribs cracking like kindling, and somehow, impossibly, you're still conscious. Not for minutes, not for hours, for 3 entire days. That's exactly what happened in 1586. A woman was pinned beneath nearly 700 pounds of stone. By the first hour, her ribs had splintered like dry wood. By hour 12, she was still singing hymns through the pain. By hour 48, the physicians came to feel her pulse. It was still beating steadily. By hour 72, her heart finally gave out, and with her death, the law itself was changed forever. But even that wasn't the most horrifying part of her story. There's a medical manual that still exists today that was specifically designed to keep her awake through every single agonizing second of it. The Queen herself personally wrote instructions demanding this torture last a full 3 days. And what she didn't see coming was that this execution would accidentally trigger the biggest religious uprising in English history. By the end of this video, you're going to understand why this execution was so disturbing that historians actually tried to bury the records, why modern Supreme Court justices still cite this case when arguing about the death penalty, and the identity of the person who ordered these specific torture protocols. And trust me, it's someone you definitely learned about in history class. But before we get into all of that, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because the stories we cover on this channel are not in your textbooks for a reason. But before we get into all of that, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because the stories we cover on this channel are not in your textbooks for a reason. So let's set the scene. It's March 1586 in York, England, and a woman named Margaret Clitherow is standing trial for treason. Now, before you start thinking she was some kind of spy or assassin or political revolutionary, let me stop you right there. Her crime was hiding Catholic priests in her home. That's it. But in Protestant England under Queen Elizabeth, that was enough to get you a death sentence. Here's where things get interesting though, because Margaret wasn't like other victims of religious persecution. When they asked her to enter a plea, she did something absolutely wild. She refused to say anything at all. Not guilty, not even guilty. Complete silence. And under English law at the time, if you don't enter a plea, they can't actually put you on trial. Brilliant, right? She did this to protect her children, because if there's no trial, no witnesses can be called, which meant her kids couldn't be forced to testify against her. But the courts had their own little loophole called peine forte et dure, which translates to punishment hard and severe. Basically, they'd press you under stones until you either agreed to plead or you died. Most people lasted about 15 to 20 minutes before their ribs caved in and punctured their lungs. It was supposed to be quick, relatively merciful by medieval standards. Except that's not what happened to Margaret. The executioners set up the standard equipment: wooden board, smooth river stones, leather straps, expecting this whole thing to be over in maybe 15 minutes. 30 tops if she was particularly stubborn. But then new orders came down from London. And these weren't your typical execution orders. These were written, specific, with exact weight measurements and precise time intervals and requirements for medical supervision. Someone wanted Margaret Clitherow to suffer longer than any execution victim in recorded history. And I'm going to tell you exactly who that someone was in just a minute. The document detailing her execution protocol still exists in the British archives. And when you read it, it reads less like an execution order and more like a medical procedure manual. Standard protocol for this type of execution was simple: pile on stones until the person dies. Usually takes 15 to 30 minutes. Done. Margaret's protocol was completely different. They started with only 50 pounds of weight, which isn't even enough to kill someone. It's barely enough to restrict breathing. Then they added weight in 15-minute intervals. 50 pounds, then 75, then 100. A physician stood beside her the entire time, and his job wasn't to help her. It was to monitor her pulse, to make sure she stayed conscious, to calculate the exact maximum weight her body could sustain without immediately dying. Think about what that experience must have been like. The first stones go on, and suddenly breathing becomes work. More weight gets added, and your ribs start to flex inward. You taste blood, your vision tunnels. But you can't pass out because they've calibrated this specifically to keep you awake. Hour 1. Margaret is screaming. There's a crowd gathered outside the toll booth where they're doing this because executions were public back then, meant to serve as a warning. Hour 3. Her ribs crack. Witnesses said you could hear it. Described the sound like green wood breaking. Hour 6. She stops screaming, but she's still conscious, still praying out loud in Latin. Hour 12. The physician checks her pulse, and it's still strong. So they add another 100 pounds. This wasn't just an execution anymore. This was an experiment in human endurance. How long can the human body survive being crushed? How much pain can consciousness withstand? By hour 24, something unprecedented starts happening. The crowd is asking questions. Why is this taking so long? Who ordered this? This isn't justice. This is torture. Remember those questions because they become really important later. The executioners, when pressed, finally admit they're following specific written orders. And those orders came from Queen Elizabeth I herself. There's actually a document you can go look at right now in the British National Archives. A letter dated March 1586 from the Privy Council to the authorities in York. And it has handwritten margin notes in Elizabeth's own handwriting. The printed text orders Margaret's execution. Standard stuff. But the margin notes, those are what's terrifying. No less than 3 days duration. Public witness essential. Maintain consciousness throughout. Elizabeth didn't just approve this execution. She designed it. She specified the duration. She demanded consciousness. She wanted this to be a spectacle that would terrify every Catholic in England into submission. But here's why Elizabeth made it so personal. Margaret wasn't just any Catholic. She was a butcher's wife, middle class, respected in her community, ran a successful business, had 8 children. She was exactly the kind of person Elizabeth needed to make an example of because ordinary citizens could relate to her. The message was clear. If we'll do this to a respectable mother and businesswoman, imagine what we'll do to you. And look, from Elizabeth's perspective, this wasn't just religious persecution. It was national security. The Pope had excommunicated her in 1570. Catholic priests entering England were declared traitors, and people hiding those priests were considered enemy agents. Elizabeth wanted this execution talked about for generations, a deterrent so brutal that no one would ever dare help a Catholic priest again. But here's what Elizabeth never saw coming. Margaret weaponized her own execution. What happened during those 72 hours didn't terrify people into submission. It did the exact opposite. By hour 36, Margaret is still conscious, and she's not screaming anymore. She's singing hymns in Latin, the same verses over and over about salvation and resurrection. The crowd has swelled to nearly 300 people, the biggest public gathering York had seen in years. And the mood is shifting. Hour 48. Margaret's voice is getting weaker. Her lungs are collapsing, but she's still singing, still praying, And here's the critical part. Members of the crowd start joining her. Protestant citizens, Elizabeth's own subjects, are singing along with Catholic hymns. The executioners are panicking because this is not how this was supposed to go. This was supposed to inspire fear. Instead, it's inspiring sympathy and admiration. Hour 55, a Protestant alderman, an actual city official, demands they stop. This has gone too far, he says. End it now. The executioners tell him they can't. They have orders from the Queen. 3 days minimum. Hour 60. Margaret's pulse is finally weakening. The physician reports she's losing consciousness, so they add more weight to keep her alert. 700 pounds total now. Her chest caved inward by 3 inches, and even as her body is failing, Margaret uses her last conscious moments to do something extraordinary. She forgives her executioners out loud by name. I forgive you, John Fawcett. I forgive you, Thomas Ward. This is not your sin. It is the sin of those who command you. Imagine spending 3 days crushing someone to death, and she forgives you. She placed the moral responsibility exactly where it belonged, on the people who designed the torture. Hour 72, March 25th, 1586, 3:47 p.m. Margaret Clitherow dies. The crowd goes completely silent. No cheers, no satisfaction. Then someone starts clapping, slowly, and others join in. A standing ovation for a condemned traitor. The executioners scramble to disperse the crowd, but it's too late. Something fundamental has shifted in York. Elizabeth wanted to create fear. She created a martyr instead. Within 48 hours, York is in chaos. Protestant citizens are demanding answers. Why did that take 3 days? Who authorized that? That wasn't execution. That was murder. The city council tries to suppress the story, but it's too late. News spreads across England through pamphlets, the viral media of the 1500s, and every retelling makes Margaret more heroic and Elizabeth more monstrous. Within 2 weeks, 300 Protestant residents of York formally convert to Catholicism and cite Margaret's execution as the reason. The thing that was meant to scare people away drove them toward it. Within 6 months, Elizabeth's advisors are panicking because the execution has become a propaganda disaster. Catholic countries are using it as evidence of English barbarity. Even Protestant allies are uncomfortable. And within 3 years, in 1589, the English Parliament passes new execution reform laws. The first time in English history that there are legal limits on how long an execution can last. The law from 1589 specifically states that all executions must result in swift dispatch, and that prolonged torture under the guise of lawful punishment is hereby forbidden. This becomes the foundation for humane execution standards across Europe. Gets cited in French legal reforms during the 1790s. Influences the American Constitution's 8th Amendment that prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. One woman's 72 hours literally rewrote Western legal philosophy. In 1970, almost 400 years later, the Catholic Church officially canonized Margaret Clitherow as a saint. Today, the site of her execution in York is a pilgrimage destination that thousands visit every year. And Queen Elizabeth's execution order is preserved in the British archives as evidence of cruel excess, frequently cited in modern death penalty debates. Here's the wildest part. In 2023, the U.S. Supreme Court cited the Margaret Clitherow case in a ruling about execution protocols. Her name appears in legal briefs arguing against prolonged pharmaceutical executions. Suffering from 1586 is still shaping law today. The execution that was supposed to terrorize people into submission became proof that tyranny contains the seeds of its own destruction. Elizabeth wanted to demonstrate absolute power. Instead, she demonstrated that there are things more powerful than absolute power. You can destroy someone's body, but if they refuse to let you break their spirit, you lose. The executioners thought they were crushing a woman. They accidentally crushed an entire system of legal brutality. Could you remain conscious and defiant for 72 hours? Could you sing hymns while your ribs are shattering? Could you forgive the people torturing you? Most of us want to believe we could be that brave. But the truth is, Margaret wasn't born heroic. She was a butcher's wife who made a choice to protect her faith and her family. And when that choice led to unimaginable suffering, she made another choice, not to let them break her spirit. That's the real lesson here. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the refusal to let fear make your choices. And in 2024, we're still having debates about execution protocols. Still asking how much suffering is acceptable when the state takes a life. Still questioning whether prolonged consciousness during execution constitutes torture. In those debates, lawyers and judges still reference Margaret Clitherow's 72 hours. Her suffering set a standard that's still used to define the boundaries of state power. One woman, 3 days, 4 centuries of legal reform. So here's my question for you. If you knew your suffering could change history, could rewrite laws, could protect future generations, would you have the courage to endure it? Drop your answer in the comments below. If this story affected you, hit that subscribe button, because next week we're covering 3 execution methods that lasted even longer. One took 17 days and involved the victim performing surgery on himself. This has been the story of Margaret Clitherow, the woman who turned her execution into a revolution. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.